Times of quarantine and virtual or Zoom university, it's really hard for us to get to know each other. Not only that, for those of us that are conscious of our carbon footprint, we may not be as like eager to travel long distances to conferences anymore. I certainly am not. I feel some type of way about um, air travel. And I really think that social media allows us to tell people who we are in a relatively free, safe, and accessible venue, which is social media. Not only that, and I'll talk about visibility at the end, toward the end of the live stream. Social media allows us to inform others about our contributions, our professional contributions to our field. Obviously, so you can let people know what you're working on, and I'll tell you why that may be important for you to directly be the advertiser of your own work. The data speaks for themselves as to why I think this is important. This is just a brief overview. Social media allows us to really get a quick overview of current events that are going on with our colleagues, our peers, and even people outside of our domain, which is really good for cross-pollination, interdisciplinary collaboration, etc. Community building is also facilitated by social media, particularly for people who are isolated, whether due to lack of mobility or due to lack of resources to be able to get around and make it to conferences, to be able to meet people in person. And just as a side note, it is not always feasible or safe for certain groups of people to get together in traditional venues. That's just my opinion. Exchange and inspire ideas. So, last but not least, I learn a lot on social media because I get to hear from people that are usually um, unsung, usually don't get the podium, and would be relatively invisible if not for access to their own podium online. So, whether you think it's overkill or not, social media allows us to hear from everyone, which is one of the tenets of DEI. It's inclusivity. Social media allows us to include multiple voices around the table and different voices. So now I'm going to go into what I think about the various platforms, and the platforms that I'm talking about on this live stream are the ones that I think are relevant to academia. If your favorite platform is not listed here, it's because I haven't found that being on those platforms is helpful either way to my academic career. So, LinkedIn, and if you look at the bottom in the red, that's going to talk about the timeline for which I think people should start engaging in LinkedIn. So, as soon as you are entering into university and you're an undergraduate, you should establish a LinkedIn profile with your university email address. Your LinkedIn profile is essentially an online resume, which is helpful for point number one, job searches. So, job searches are facilitated through LinkedIn. People can find you, they can see your endorsements, they can see your qualifications and any certifications that you may have. Also, if you are affiliated with certain alumni groups or academic institutions, that also makes it easier for recruiters to find you. So go ahead and do that as soon as possible if you haven't already. Also, I have found that LinkedIn is really helpful for keeping up with academic announcements as well as what I call industry announcements. So, my colleagues and friends that are in industry, I can see when they're having work anniversaries, I can see when they're recruiting for positions, etc. I like when people post their papers on LinkedIn. People post their new companies that have spun off from research, and you get to engage with your colleagues when they get awards. LinkedIn is also really, really helpful for alumni relations. And because I think it's quite an extensive authentication process with LinkedIn. You can pretty much verify who was associated with a college or a university. And it's really helpful for keeping up with alumni, which is critical to the missions of various departments. So in my department, alumni relations is mission critical for keeping the network engaged with the department and to understand department performance. Obviously, LinkedIn is great for networking because you can private message people. Twitter. All right. So after LinkedIn, there is Twitter. Honestly, I think Twitter becomes more useful the farther you are in your career. And I do mean your professional facing Twitter account. You may be on Twitter from high school, and that's fine. But when it comes to the handle that you will be using to communicate with future coworkers, future supervisors, I think this presence becomes more important as a graduate student and definitely as a principal investigator. For graduate students, and I'll explain why in just a second, it's great for us to be able to see your papers. And we can connect papers with your name, with your school, and with your advisor. And although we may not register who you are when we see you on Twitter, but if we are engaging with you online and then we see you in a conference, we can go back to that initial connection on Twitter. Posting your papers on Twitter is the same as posting them on LinkedIn. It's just going to be a different audience. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Same announcements, just like I said, can go on Twitter. Twitter also has helpful threads. So I find that there's a thriving community of accounts with no faces. So sometimes we know who run the accounts and sometimes we don't, but it's community building, and certain threads will post anonymous questions and then you can solicit advice from all over the place. The threads can be kind of long, and of course you can use services to condense a thread. And but this is written form, and there are accessibility options on Twitter to provide alternative text and images and so forth. But I'm going to talk about storytelling at the end of this, which poses a different line of thinking when it comes to written information versus spoken information. And I think Twitter is good for written information for sure. Nice little thread. You can bookmark it, go back to it later, and it's helpful. I find Twitter to be the most helpful networking platform that I have ever used, particularly for international collaborations. I have gotten to know some new international collaborators through that app. And that would not have happened in the absence of social media. Also, I think important for Twitter is that we are adjacent to the public. LinkedIn is behind some serious authentication, and you really can't view people's profiles on LinkedIn unless you're connected to them. But everyone can see what you're doing on Twitter unless you have a private account, unless you have security things on your account. But everyone can see what we write on Twitter. Therefore, we can reach people that are in the arts. We can reach people that are not in STEM. And I have some information about why this public outreach can be beneficial to our mission as STEM academics or academics in general. Instagram. All right. I think that I don't have a recommendation for when people should get on Instagram because I haven't found that it is mission critical for my networking and for distributing information about my group. But it is a fun and engaging and public facing way to share interesting images with the world, to engage with my students and highlight their accomplishments. And although I have not started, I would say that reels are pretty useful for information dissemination as well. So reels could possibly be really important for STEM education. I haven't seen much content on those. Alrighty. I also don't have a particular recommendation for when academics should be on TikTok. Although I'm going to present an article in just a minute about why we may need to skedaddle on over to TikTok. So, what I have found through research and just through word of mouth and through browsing the content, the younger generations use TikTok pretty heavily. And I'm talking about Zoomers and Generation Alpha. That's where they are. And once enough of older generations get on TikTok, they'll probably reinvent another prototype that just shifts the audience somewhere else. I also find that, and also it's important to reach the younger generations, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. I don't want to preempt myself. I have also found that it is way easier for me to upload videos and shorts on TikTok than it is for Instagram. Okay. Also, the algorithm on TikTok is a different ball game, meaning the rate of circulation of your videos and your posts is way faster than that of Instagram. For example, I'll get a post on TikTok that gets 400 views versus 40 views. So it's 100 times the reach. My bad. 10 times the reach. Getting those orders of magnitude wrong. So I think that when it comes to fast dissemination of your information and reaching a different audience, TikTok could be helpful. So this is what I just alluded to. Business Insider put out an article around July of 2022, and it states nearly half of Gen Z is using TikTok and Instagram for search instead of Google, according to Google's own data. So let's go on over to that article and see what else they are talking about. All right. Excuse me. Now, the 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 headline for this article, the highlights state nearly 40% of Gen Z prefers using TikTok and Instagram for search over Google, according to Google's internal data. So when I first saw this, it took me aback. I couldn't believe it. And so I asked some of my undergraduate researchers, I asked one of them, I said, "Do you do this? Are you actually doing this?" They said, "Yes." But for restaurants and for l- learning how to do different yoga poses, things like that. So they are going to TikTok and Instagram to search for things that are relevant for their personal lives. But it's hard for me to believe that even younger than Gen Z, maybe Gen Alpha, would not go to these social media platforms for professional things as well. I see a lot of day in the life content about Berkeley on TikTok, and it's pretty informative. And so the younger people are talking to each other through posts, things that we never had access, or I didn't necessarily have access to when I was going through undergrad. So if we want to get our message out there, then perhaps we should meet the people where they are. So it says Google is changing features in search and maps to try to attract a younger audience. This is always the goal of big companies, marketing agencies. The future is the youth. The youth drive consumerism, to be honest, and women that own homes as well. So it says TikTok poses a threat to not only Google search, but to YouTube. This may be hyperbole, but I'm pretty sure that they are backing that up with this short little blurb here. I don't know. I don't want to make a comment about this because I still think that traditional search engines will reign for quite a while because in academia, we don't necessarily cite TikTok and Instagram in our professional writing in proposals. So I think Google will still be and Bing and whatever Web of Science will still be king in academic spaces. But when it comes to science communication, I think these two platforms could be really helpful, and they are. I've seen several SciComm influencers post in there, and they do a great job. So going back to the slides, I'll talk about YouTube, and I probably need to speed up a little bit. I find that YouTube is a bigger time investment. So this is for people who probably want to post little vignettes that are related to their research for graduate students. You may want to post your outreach events, recordings of that. You may want to record a demo for a lab that you're TAing. So course materials are great for posting on YouTube. There's quite a bit of educational content from my colleagues there that I find to be really nice. And YouTube can handle bigger files, whereas Instagram and TikTok will cut you off. You can host live workshops and meetings via Zoom through YouTube, right? You can push a live meeting in Zoom to YouTube. I find that it's highly searchable and you can embed these YouTube videos anywhere. It's really nimble, so it's compatible with a lot of different platforms and websites. And YouTube is great for public outreach, once again, because almost everyone can access YouTube unless there's a weird VPN in their country or you need a VPN in their country. So now we're getting to podcasting. All right. So in my view, a podcast can be audio only or audio visual. And so I do both audio and audio visual podcasting. Essentially, to get started, you need a high quality camera, a high quality microphone, and then some kind of headphone or earpiece so that any sound coming from your device doesn't interrupt your recording. And the good thing about those first three, or at least the first two, you can do that on your phone. So you can record podcasting content from your phone. It may not be as great of quality compared to using more expensive equipment, but if it's an accessibility issue, you can post your videos to YouTube from your phone. So when it comes to interviews, Zoom facilitates the interviews. And then Zoom will record your meeting, and then you can open that meeting recording in editing software. I've heard the YouTube folks talk about Final Cut Pro. I don't use Final Cut Pro. I use iMovie because it is free with the purchase of a computer, namely Mac. So everything I talked about up there and above can really be available in one package. I'm not endorsing any particular technology, but the desktop Mac has all of this all included. I did purchase an external microphone because I do think that's important for me because I'm soft spoken. You want a computer or some external hard drive to save all of your podcasting videos because videos take up a lot of room and you can overshoot your data storage pretty easily. And before I get into brand identity, I also want to say you'll need a series of accounts. You'll need StreamYard if you want to host a nice live stream. So I'm using the StreamYard service. It is not free. There is a free version, but I have upgraded. So it is a bit of an investment if you do want to podcast, but I have a reason for this investment. And I'll talk about that in the latter half of this video. Now, in my opinion, you should have a purpose for getting online and doing long form content. And so I'm going to jump to the bottom. You should specialize in something, like you should be an expert in something, right? Which allows you to create a niche. And in terms of podcasting, a niche is an area in podcasting that currently isn't covered. For example, I specialize in air quality modeling and higher education. I have degrees in a few different subjects, and I've taught a few different subjects. I have friends all across STEM. Therefore, I specialize in the behind the scenes of higher education and what it takes to succeed in this space, particularly in STEM. And my unique background, my unique cultural and life experiences, cultural identity make that even more specific and even more nuanced. So I've identified my niche, and I don't see a lot of people doing that online the way that I'm doing it. So I feel like I have something to say. Brand identity is the visual and the slogans and taglines and naming that is associated with your online presence. And so obviously my brand identity is largely characterized by the term under the hood. So that's the online community that encompasses the YouTube channel, Spotify, my Instagram. And I am Dr. Sunshine. I've had that handle on Twitter for a while. And it just goes together. And for those of you that haven't figured it out yet, under the hood is a double entendre. So when we graduate with a master's and above, we wear what's called a hood. And so it looks like it's choking us, but it rests right here on our décolletage and hangs off the back of us. And that's our hood. But also going under the hood means you're checking to see what's right or wrong with the system that you're investigating, namely a car. So we are going under the academic hood on this channel. It is not a fly-by-night. It's not a one-off. When you're developing this brand identity, you want it to be purposeful and intentional. And this whole concept was, the inception of this concept that I'm doing online started in 2020. So it takes a while to find the time and find the space and find the courage to launch your online presence. Now, I alluded to the fact that this is 2 years in the making. The YouTube channel was born July 2021. So you may be thinking, well, how the heck do you find time to do this? Well, for one, just as a secret is no secret, I don't have children. So that frees up a lot of my time to be able to indulge in what I think is a hobby, which is podcasting is a hobby. It's one that I find to be enriching and public facing, and I hope that I'm providing a useful service for people that may not have ready access to a mentor to get through STEM higher education. There may not be someone with my particular identity, my particular intersection on their campus. And so I know that for a fact. Or even in their department with STEM specialization. I'm hoping to reach that audience, both domestically and internationally. So to me, it's a worthwhile use of my time. So if you have a hobby like training for a marathon, if you play tennis, if you do a lot of hiking, the same amount of time that you spend on those leisure activities, you could spend on podcasting. So this work really doesn't interfere with my day-to-day job, right? I keep them compartmentalized. So just some idea about how long it takes to do things. So if I am editing a long form video, meaning I have filmed an interview via Zoom, it may take me 2 hours, and it's a 1 hour interview. It may or an hour and a half interview. It may take me about 2 hours to edit, but sometimes in one sitting I can pop it out in maybe 30 minutes. But I'm going to say that this editing, it depends on how busy I am. If I am doing a traditional podcast style video where I'm just recording my voice and there may be some visual aids, the script that creating a pre-recorded podcast style video also includes this editing here, right? But also I try to write a script, and the script writing takes about an hour. Actually recording my voice takes about 45 minutes, and then maybe it'll take an hour to edit that and get it uploaded. So maybe 2 to 3 hours, but that's the same as going to the gym. That's the same as going on a hike. So it's about prioritizing the time that you want to spend on something like a podcast. Now, planning, scheduling, and the logistics that are involved in running an online community, it's pretty much the same as teaching a class. So scheduling the interviews, writing the emails, writing people can take about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. And I say an hour because if it's really involved and the planning takes place over several months, I like to send some questions ahead of time. In total, that'll take about an hour. And then, so you can add all of this up and you can see that you're spending 3 to 4 hours per product. And that's on the long end. I'd say 1 to 2 hours per output is about right. And if it's something that you enjoy, then it shouldn't be that miserable. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of podcasting is the RSS feed. And so RSS stands for really simple syndication, I believe. And the RSS website allows you to upload audio files, upload episode art, and then it publishes those files and they give you a link to your feed. So as you can see on the screen, under the hood has an RSS website, and there is an RSS feed URL associated with under the hood audio content. This is all you have to do to get your podcast published in the major venues like Spotify, Google Podcasts, not so much Apple Podcasts. I don't publish there, but definitely Google Podcasts and Spotify. So you can submit your RSS URL or RSS code to Spotify and it will publish your episodes. So I don't do any direct interfacing with Spotify besides creating an account because Spotify takes the information directly from the RSS feed. I believe I pay for this. I think it's around $12 a month. So if you're adding all this up in your head, obviously you're investing in filming equipment, you're investing in subscriptions to things like StreamYard, things like RSS feed. So it's not really a profitable thing to do. If you're looking to get into this for money, it's really not the gravy train you may think it is. This is really a service-minded thing, and it's really a hobby. Now, I want to spend the rest of the live talking about why I think it's important for us to be on social media, despite what traditional people may say, despite academic traditions. What's so different about today that I think that social media is important? Number one, as I alluded to before, social media allows you to improve your visibility in your field, and it facilitates engagement with people that you probably normally wouldn't talk to. So social media breaks down barriers to getting to know other people. Let's jump into it. Engagement. Now, this graph is showing the change over time in the number of doctorates that are awarded by U.S. colleges and universities from 1958 to 2022. This is from Inside Higher Ed. The blue line is total, purple is science and engineering fields, and the green line is non-science and engineering fields. So let's just focus on the purple line because that's what's driving the uptick. We went from awarding 5,000 doctorates per year to almost 40,000 doctorates. And if you can imagine, each one of those doctorate holders is publishing on average 3 to 5 papers. I don't know about you, but I can't even begin to keep up with everyone that may be publishing in my field at all times. So back in the day, you could read a journal issue cover to cover, and perhaps there wasn't much material in your space, especially if you were in a new space. Today, it's absolutely impossible, especially with the business model of all of these journals, particularly the publisher, and we all know who it is, that is always running a special issue. The rate at which they're publishing, it's really hard to keep up with all that material. So I find that social media distills all of that information for me, because not only are people announcing their papers in real time, so if I miss the alert in my email that is drowned with thousands of other emails, I can catch it on Twitter or LinkedIn. And usually people post their graphical abstract, they post the top 3 to 6 to 10 highlights from the paper. And I am able to keep up with the rate at which people are publishing by virtue of the volume of people that are being graduated. We're scaling up at a pace that is not keeping up with jobs available in academia. Now, people will find jobs outside of academia, but we're not placing 40,000 people in academic jobs every year. So this is why I think social media is important. Because if you're connected to 1,000 people, you can keep up roughly with what they're doing a lot faster than you would by triaging the journal blast and getting alerts from Google Scholar. Now, the other reason why I think social media is absolutely critical, and this became pretty evident during the deepest part of quarantine, is the fact that the venues that we used to rely on for the exchanging of technical and scientific information, conferences, they're just not accessible. Not to the voices and the perspectives that we desperately need to hear from. So, I'm showing you guys a preview of an article by Crystal Vasquez, Dr. Vasquez, who is a leading voice in the area of disabilities in STEM. The article states virtual conferences aren't as accessible as you might think. They have some advantages for people with disabilities, but plenty of problems as well. So in this article, she is talking, or they are talking about the pros and cons. So I'm going to go over to that article. And this is from Scientific American. Now, Dr. Vasquez is positing in-person conferences are notoriously inaccessible, yet little has been done to rectify these issues. This has greatly limited the number of disabled and chronically ill scientists who can attend these meetings. Well stated. So, if someone is immunocompromised in 2022 due to long COVID or some other illness, and we're returning to in-person meetings, or even someone that isn't chronically ill that is just not up for getting exposed to COVID for the first, second, or third time, they don't want to go to the conference. As simply traveling to and from the venue can be an accessibility nightmare. Airports, ground transportation, the hotels, the conference venue. So, what's the recourse for someone that can't participate? There are still barriers when those people can actually attend the event. There is one part else that I thought was nice. Late in 2020, accessibility oversights were still aplenty, and it was especially obvious when disabled people weren't included in the planning committee. As an example, the American Geophysical Union fall meeting automated captioning turned portions of the scientific talks into gibberish. Now, this is a knock against virtual conferences. So I'm not saying that it is a one-off solution or a foolproof solution. So this is something we need to think about. Craptions, as they are often called, combined with recordings that don't require presenters to keep their cameras on, prevent those who rely on captions or speech reading from fully understanding the presentation. So while I'm not completely advocating for craptions, we do need to make conferences more accessible. And I'd say social media circumvents all of this. We can stream on YouTube, and YouTube has automated captions and transcripts. They have transcripts. Twitter has alternative text where we can actually engage pretty inclusively. So let's go back to the slides. Gender inequity, the next point, in speaking opportunities at the American Geophysical Union fall meeting. This is an open access article from Nature Communications led by Dr. Heather Ford. This article was written in 2018. Now, I attend AGU, or at least I used to in the before times. Now my students are going to go and present. Gender inequities. You're welcome to go and look up this paper after the live stream, and I will also link it in the description box. This one's pretty on the nose. Who gets to give an oral presentation at these meetings versus people that are resigned to a poster? The article gives different reasons, such as women opt for posters more. And in general, women are not given the oral slots as often as their male counterparts. So women may feel stifled at these meetings and their visibility isn't as high. So giving an oral platform presentation will give you high visibility in a well-attended session, as opposed to getting random passersby, if they're not familiar with you, to stop by your poster in a poster hall. And what makes it difficult for the American Geophysical Union is that it's attended by 10,000 plus people. Once again, going back to social media, if you're curating your professional presence online, more people will be able to engage with your work meaningfully on a platform like Twitter, on a platform like LinkedIn. Whether they listen, engage, and turn that into non-performative actions, like citing your work, is another story. But at least you're visible. At least people have to make the choice to ignore you. Nextly, this next comment, once again by Dr. Heather Ford, says women from some underrepresented minorities are given too few talks at world's largest earth science conference, referring once again to AGU. That's a double whammy for me. I promise you, I would be invisible without Twitter, regardless of my papers. Now, if I'm working in a space that is really popular, it's hot, CRISPR, I'm working on the COVID-19 vaccine and mRNAs, maybe I'll get a lot of visibility. But I particularly work in a field in engineering that is small, a field in environmental engineering that's small, that's air quality modeling or air quality research, and then a field in air quality research that's small, air quality modeling. So I am 4 times less likely to get visibility for my work. Social media and having a presence online has allowed people to learn who I am and what I do. It would not happen at a meeting like AGU unless I start branching out and doing work that is more hot topic, that is more in line with the majority interests. And my work is not in line with the majority interests. So let's look at this graphic. Fewest chances. Underrepresented minority women comprise the group that is least likely to be invited or assigned to speak, but they are overrepresented in requesting to present posters. So, underrepresented minority are opted for posters. I can't explain this one. It feels safer sometimes. Sometimes a poster just feels safer. And obviously, we're not getting the talks. If we're, the proportion of abstracts here is pretty low. And these are invited. Now, the lighter shade is going to be women and the darker shade is going to be men. So the bar here for invited URM women is lower than all 4 of these categories, as indicated in the title. So I kind of know this just anecdotally and from lived experience, but this makes me not even want to attend. To be honest, I like to attend and I like to fellowship with people, but I don't go in hopes of people learning more about my work, to be honest. People will just walk right past you and not really care about what you're doing anyway. So I find that reaching an audience that may be more interested in my work for its inherent qualities or whatever is easier online. Now, this may be a longer live stream, but we're going to get through it. Why else is social media important? Well, most of us know that when we are applying for an NSF proposal, or excuse me, applying for an award or submitting a proposal, we have to write about the broader impacts of our work. So let's go to that article. Essentially, the broader impacts answer this question. That statement answers this question. How does your research impact society? Scientists and engineers funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation are accountable to taxpayers for conducting research and collectively moving their research beyond the lab. Imagine that. To impact the public good, thereby benefiting the economy, society, and discovery itself. This is what NSF defines as broader impacts. Okay, so what's the impact of your work beyond your microcosm on campus, in the lab, in the off-campus research facility? That's the question we're trying to answer. And how will you know what that impact is if you don't engage with the stakeholders of your research? Stakeholders are people that have or that are likely to receive a benefit from your work and that have a vested interest in its success. So let's look at this list right here. The guide provides 9 examples of potential outcomes that might align with your research. This is not a checklist. The broader impact statement is not limited to these outcomes. So some of the outcomes that your broader impacts may include, so your work may encourage full participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities in STEM. All right. So your activities may require undergraduate research assistance. It may require community engaged research. And you may have activities proposed that directly engage with these groups. What better way to increase participation with your work than online engagement? If you're hosting a workshop, what's a better way to get the public involved and have non-performative participation than to do some interactive workshops via YouTube or social media? Likely these groups of people don't have ready access to the resources to make showing up in person accessible. So social media and being online really enhances the participation of people in groups that don't have ready accessibility to STEM venues. So an outcome of your work could be to develop a diverse, globally competitive STEM workforce. How do you create a diverse and globally competitive STEM workforce? For one, you have to reach a different audience. And you can't reach a different audience doing the same things, going to the same conference venues. If it wasn't working before, unless there are some serious structural interventions, it's going to be hard to attract those groups again. Get online. Get online and put forth free information about how to be competitive in STEM spaces, about how to manage applications for free. I consider the work I do with Under the Hood to be developing a diverse, globally competitive STEM workforce, because I am just meeting the students where they are. Even if they're not students, they're planning on joining a lab one day. I can reach them through this material online. That's what's in the back of my mind. Not everybody is going to make it to Berkeley's campus, but everyone can click a YouTube video. Enhancing infrastructure for research and education. So building a platform where people can come and ask you questions. So like the account, I think it's Academic Chatter on Twitter. That account is education infrastructure that allows people to submit anonymous comments and then solicit information about how to be a better researcher or how to get resources for the problems that they're facing. That is a part of someone's educational experience. No, we may not be teaching the first law of thermodynamics, but the advice and the mentorship that they get through these social media platforms enables them to build resilience while they're getting their education. So I fully believe that our participation online in social media activities meets the spirit of the NSF broader impacts. I'm happy to debate anyone on this. So let's go back to the slides. Like I said, it's going to be a long one. Number 2, academia is seeped in capitalism. What does this have to do with social media? Let's talk about it. Well, for one, something that I learned through social media is that the White House issued a new policy that will require by 2026 all federally funded research results to be freely available to the public without delay. So no more embargoes. Well, I take that back. No more paywalls in the first year. Ending long-standing ability of journals to paywall results for up to 1 year. Coverage coming on Science Insider. So the Office of Science and Technology Policy is issuing the guidance to make federally funded research freely available without delay. Thank you. So there's possibly an agreement between the federal agencies or maybe not. Yep, they're getting rid of the optional 12-month embargo as well. Why should we be double taxed? Meaning, if the taxpayer dollars are paying for the research, why should we pay an additional access tax? And we're not going to talk about the tax and the mounds of taxes that pile up for the people that are actually reviewing the papers who don't get paid for what they're doing. So there's free labor going into reviewing papers for journals that are for profit, and they turn a pretty massive profit. So they're exploiting review labor and then making us pay to access taxpayer funded research outcomes. So social media, all right, and online engagement, and probably our cries were being heard from social media, which I'm hoping pushed them for the Office of Science and Technology Policy to get this done. Now, by sharing our papers online, sharing the snippets and the highlights in a Twitter thread increases the accessibility to our work. Granted, even if the paper is sitting behind a paywall, at least we know what they did and we have a few highlights. And so I think that's one of the benefits of social media. Skirting the paywall. There are other repositories like ResearchGate that also allow you to kind of skirt the paywall, but I find it to be a bit clunky. Now, social media is also super useful for challenging questionable beliefs that have haunted academia for decades. Let's get into those questionable beliefs. All right, here we go. Professor Lee Cronin says, excellence before identity, period. A seemingly benign 3-word comment that it looks here like there's not much engagement, but this set off a chain reaction and people were actually upset about this tweet. Why should we care about something like this? Well, for one, this man and his identity is the most represented in STEM. He obviously holds this belief, therefore, that belief is going to drive his decision making in academic spaces. Now, he probably thinks that he has a good take here, excellence before identity. But I'm going to push back here, and I can push back because I have a platform. Because social media allows me to do that. But back in the day, this type of rhetoric just was able to be in the ether and no one could challenge it. Because when you're in the only person in the room that looks like you, you're intimidated and you may not want to speak up. But when you get online and you say what you have to say and you have community to back you up, you're more likely to challenge some of these questionable beliefs. Now, part of me says, yes, when it comes to prioritizing things upon which to choose a candidate, choose someone for the job, we do need to look at technical acumen first, and then we need to consider their identity and whether or not they're contributing to overrepresentation. But what this tweet fails to do it fails to consider the historical implications for what he's just said. Identity was everything in Jim Crow during legalized segregation. Identity was the first thing that people used to make choices about employment. But 70 to 50 to 70 years later, identity no longer matters. Do you see the red herring here? So when the system was set up to benefit only one group of people based on their identity, it was okay. But now that there are equal opportunities for everyone to show up and participate in systems that were historically shut out for them, all of a sudden we should only be looking at excellence, or that's what we should prioritize. So I need takes like this to be put into perspective of history. I'm going to posit that this man is going to use this ethos during search committees. Now, I know a lot of people like Professor Cronin who are stuck on your identity doesn't matter. It used to. Now I'm pulling up an example of how social media has enabled me to engage in discourse that pushes back on these questionable takes. I'm not going to read it. You all can go to my Twitter and look up my October 21st, 2021 response to a similar but more heinous identity politic conflict. I'll read the first part. I have been quietly observing the online responses to the MIT EAPS and Berkeley Basque conversations. I keep seeing the question asked, what harm does an invitation cause? All right. I then talk about how the author of an article about DEI, I'm not even going to get into this, and maybe I'll make a separate video. The author of a DEI article disagrees with campus efforts to extend opportunities to historically underrepresented groups and implies that those of true merit are excluded in the process of improving DEI efforts. So the person that wrote an article about DEI says that it excludes the actual people that have merit. Does anyone see the problem with that assumption? The assumption is that people that are benefiting from DEI efforts have no merit. That is a dangerous set of core values, or a dangerous core value. It's really dangerous. And I have a zero tolerance for it in any organization that doesn't protect people from this type of dangerous rhetoric. I explain why it's dangerous in the thread, so you're welcome to go and take a look. I might link it here. But if not for Twitter, I wouldn't be able to push back on these harmful and pretty illogical arguments about DEI. Take a look at the Venn diagram here. So folks like Professor Cronin think that the intersection of these two circles is empty. That is false. So on the left, we have the circle containing researchers that are excellent, have technical acumen, and that will likely have great impact on their space. In the right, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't want to make assumptions about why that 3-word tweet was tweeted, but my thread was in response to an article that specifically said that this this middle part is empty. Right here on this YouTube, I'm going to tell you that the middle part of this circle is thriving. And think about the person that you know in your backyard, in your department, that lies right at the intersection of that. But guess what? One of the excuses for not seeking out people in that middle part, and this is verbatim what I've heard from a college dean, there just aren't any. There just aren't any. They're just hard to find. I wonder what would be the remedy for bringing visibility to people who are both talented and have diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, and diverse points of view. I wonder how we can increase their visibility, particularly when conferences are statistically inaccessible and statistically you know, working against the visibility of people at the intersection of these two circles. What can we do? What can we do to solve that? I don't know. Let's let social media thrive. You're going to meet them on social media. You're going to meet them and you're going to get to know them on pages like Twitter, on LinkedIn. When you click on the Black N hashtag, you're going to see it. When you click on AAPI and geosciences, you'll see it. They're not underrepresented in STEM, but when you click on the SACNAS, when you click on Geo-Latinas, you'll find them. And it takes an active effort to do that. But people that tell you that the people at the intersection of these two circles don't exist are not looking. Because they don't think we exist. But we do. I'm one of them. Now, let's look at this thread from Dr. Regina Balcom from the University of Michigan. She's an associate professor who I thought wrote a pretty nice thread, largely about what gets valued and what doesn't. So say you don't want to increase your visibility because you've been told that social media is unprofessional and it's not for you and it's not helpful. I think that is incorrect. I think it is critically important for people at the PI stage and above to have visibility online, to rebut these harmful stereotypes and these lazy conclusions about DEI being anti-excellence, because it's not true. And a lot of people are anti-Black. A lot of people are racist against Latinos. And in their minds, we don't exist. Recently had an experience of academic snobbery of Twitter. In other words, I and others think Twitter lacks seriousness. Given that I have learned a metric F ton reading the thoughts and experiences of people of color and other marginalized folks on this Bird app, I have some thoughts. Mostly revolving around who in academia gets to have opinions about what is serious and what is not serious. Anyone can have opinions. We tend to center the opinions of those belonging to the majority. Even amongst marginalized folks, you can see that they're citing people in the majority. They don't even cite each other. Those who speak the loudest and who have been around the longest. So essentially, the first part of this thread is talking about how she has encountered someone who just blatantly said that Twitter is not serious. She's pushing back and saying that she's learned a lot. Guess what? From who? The people that don't normally get the platform to speak. The people who are in so few number that they feel afraid to speak up in fear of retaliation, in fear of harassment. And then she goes on to posit that we're centering the opinions of those in the majority. And the question of who actually gets to have an opinion is largely chosen by and decided by the majority. I used to think the same thing. I used to think that my opinion didn't matter and that I just need to shut up and get my work done. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair that my thoughts somehow have to be shrunken, that I'm not allowed to have an opinion because I'm from a marginalized identity. And I might say something that is conflicting with the majority thought. How bogus is that? If someone chooses to retaliate against me because I have an opinion, then I don't want to be in their company anymore. If I lose my job for a benign opinion that is not hurtful to anyone else, but just provides a different point of view that is in contrast with the majority thought, then I probably don't need to be in that position. How long do we have to bite our tongues? If we are coming with critical intellectual discourse in a polite way that takes into account empathy for others' experiences and opinions, why does me speaking up make you so uncomfortable? I'm going to leave it there. If you find yourself in one of these categories, perhaps it makes sense to critically evaluate what you and others think lacks seriousness, especially if that thing like Twitter allows for communication, socializing, commentary, and community building amongst marginalized folks. She said it here. Twitter allows us to commune, to learn from each other and build community and rid ourselves of the isolation that we feel in systems in which we're the only one. That's why social media is so important for me. I'm not looking for an echo chamber, but I am looking for a place to be able to share my thoughts so that I can encourage someone else across the way. Because the people in the majority have the right to do so. I do as well. And as this little example reminds me, for those who are not in the majority in academic spaces, being yourself unapologetically, yourself on this public act is an act of defiance and maybe art against those who elect themselves as the arbiter of what is meaningful. QED. It is indeed an act of defiance to show up as your authentic self. But it's also an act of self-love. To not shrink who you are, to not hide what makes you you. I'm not telling you to bring your most deep dark secret to the forefront and provide a deep history of your family drama. I'm not saying that that is what these social media apps are for. But if you have to temper your thoughts in a way that goes beyond professional decorum because you think you're going to hurt people's feelings because it's different, simply by virtue of being different, that is a problem. I believe social media allows us to do that within reason. Full disclosure, I used to play dumb because I was bullied in school for being a higher achiever by other Black people. So I thought it was appropriate to behave flighty and pretend as if I don't have a thought. That's not okay. It's not okay. I I think deeply about things. I disagree with a lot of people because my lived experience has shaped my worldview in a different way. I have a unique point of view. I have the right to share it. Last but not least, I told you it was going to be a long one. Social media allows you to tell your own story and therefore allows you to record your history accurately. We all know how much history has been lost during the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know what my family name was in Nigeria. I don't know what my family name was in Ireland or British Ireland. Excuse me, the UK and Ireland. Those are my roots. Senegambian, Nigerian, but I don't know. My people, my main descendants who have been in this country for multiple generations were not allowed to read and write. Therefore, we relied on oral history. Okay? So I think it's incredibly important to use social media to record your own history because people will tell your story inaccurately. Case in point, Jordan Amaranth, they are describing a situation where they overheard a story or overheard two people talking, a younger person and an older person, about how to apply for college. Let's read. As a first gen student, I've always known that other students with legacies in academia or family histories of college education have inherent advantages over me. But I don't think I've ever been able to see and understand that as clearly as today. So the tweet goes on, but I'm only going to post a little bit of it. Picture this August 2022. I'm trying to write my dissertation at a cafe with the looming presence of the job market approaching. Sitting in front of me, what I assume to be a mother-daughter duo, aunt-niece. They look related, but who knows, working on college applications. Yes, I'm totally eavesdropping, but come on, how else am I supposed to learn about this stuff? I am the first person in my family to ever finish high school and go to college, and neither one of my parents went to high school. They were both working at 14 in factories. So if you read the thread, if you go on, it's a pretty popular thread. They get into detail about what is being specifically told to the younger person that's applying for college. This story right here reveals a lot. It reveals a lot about mentorship gaps, and it reveals a lot about the legacy versus first generation experience. If not for social media, we wouldn't know. I thank Jordan for their courage to tell their story online so that I can also know as a professor about the mentorship gaps. So, by virtue of this person having the courage to speak up online in a polite way that isn't, wildly offensive, it's going to help other educators and other mentors to do a better job. So that's Twitter. And I alluded earlier to the fact that I think YouTube is an excellent platform for storytelling. And I'm going to tell you why. Oral history is a critical part of a lot of cultures, particularly Black culture. I don't have a document of my family history, but I remember the stories about my grandmother, my great grandmother. I remember those stories and I'll pass them down to the younger people in my family. And yes, we probably need to write these things down. But let's get into storytelling, and this will be the last of it. What makes storytelling so effective for learning? By Vanessa Boris, December 20th, 2017. We can go over to the article. So this is from Harvard Business Publishing. Now, two people co-wrote this. Okay. Telling stories is one of the most powerful means that leaders have to influence, teach, and inspire. I'm done. I'm done. YouTube is so critical for me to tell stories that aren't necessarily appropriate for the classroom, but that are appropriate for the hidden curriculum and unraveling that. Important for mentorship. What makes storytelling so effective for learning? For starters, storytelling forges connections among people and between people and ideas. Stories convey the culture, history, and values that unite people. I think storytelling and conveying culture, history, and value is important for STEM people as well. As much as we don't like to get into our feelings and all of this, there is important history that needs to be told in our community as well as STEM academics. This next one I found interesting. Stories stick. Storytelling also helps with learning because stories are easy to remember. Not everyone communicates the best through written communication, which was I alluded to with the Twitter threads. In some cultures, it's better to just talk it out. You can hear intonation, you can hear inflection, you can hear energy, importance, and it's quick. And forgive me for those of you who are speech impaired or hearing impaired. That's what captions are for. And American Sign Language or sign languages from across the world. Organizational psychologist Peg Newhouser found that learning which stems from a well-told story is remembered more accurately and for far longer than derived from facts and figures. That's why I'm here, because I think that as proficient as I can be in the classroom, as nice as a paper that I can write, I also believe that there's an aspect of mentorship and learning in STEM that has to be delivered via storytelling. And why not make that more widely accessible through social media and not hidden by a paywall of a conference fee or a subscription fee or the fee for a course? Okay? So remember to tell your own story because, and I don't know who this quote is attributed to, I'm sorry. You will suffer and they will tell other people that you liked it if you don't tell your own story. Write your own narrative. Craft your own perception, especially for marginalized people. And with that, I am done. This was a longer office hour. Thank you for your patience. I think this was long overdue, and I did get a few requests about social media, but I think there is a more nuanced conversation that needs to happen in regard to why social media is important. It is not just for self-aggrandizing. It's not for, speaking into an echo chamber. It's for inspiring new thought and offering mentorship to people that probably don't even get a chance to speak to people with a shared identity in relation to their professional preparation. So if anybody disagrees with me, feel free to put your comments in the chat. And with that, I look forward to seeing you all next week and have a good weekend.